Hello, everyone. This is Mary Kurek with Frontrunners Innovate. And true to form, today we have innovators all over the place that you're seeing on the screen. And what I'm really pleased is we're kind of focusing on manufacturing, and the impact that I see here is just so grand for the United States, particularly in terms of what this company is able to do to alleviate some of our great concerns that we've had in the pandemic, that going forward, we may not have those great concerns so much anymore. So we have before us DeRoyal Industries, and headquartered in Tennessee, but with manufacturing locations all around the southern United States, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and Virginia, and also in other countries, Costa Rica and Dominican Republic of Estonia and Guatemala, of all places. So we are all over the place. And together with Premier Incorporated, the second largest GPO in the United States, it created sort of a state-of-the-art automated process. And I don't want to get too far into it because that's like, the jewel that I want to talk about here. And I want to give them the opportunity to talk about it. But before we get that far into all the good things that you guys are doing at DeRoyal, I want to bring in Garrett Bolts. Garrett's our co-host for today, and Garrett has extreme experience in sales and marketing in the healthcare space, particularly as it connects to hospitals and ERs, or operating rooms rather, and understands government contracting as an expert, and just has been around the healthcare space for a long time. Garrett and I've known each other for what, maybe about 3 years or so now. And yeah, somewhere like that. Yeah, around that time frame, and always in the healthcare sort of vein of things. So welcome, Garrett. Appreciate that you have made the time to be with us today. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to kind of more properly introduce yourself, if you will.
Well, sure. Well, first of all, Mary, it's a pleasure to be with this group, particularly with DeRoyal. I'm an old Rocky Top guy. I went to UT. So as a matter of fact, Brian, one of the things that was interesting to me when Mary was first talking about you, back in 1980, I started with American Hospital Supply right out of UT. And I remember the stories. They were still talking about your dad, Pete, when he started DeRoyal back, I want to say it was back in 73 maybe, or early 70s. But I think he was possibly with American Hospital Supply prior to that. He had some ideas and ran it by some people, and basically they're saying, hey, sell what's in your bag or whatever. So he went out and did what he does, came up with all kinds, and built just a phenomenal company. So my hat's off to your entire family. But I stayed with the hospital supply through the transition, American Hospital, then Baxter, then Allegiance. And of course, now they're known as Cardinal Health. So it's 20 or so of those were in the operation. I'm really familiar with a lot of products that you guys carry and the reputation. I know a lot of the folks actually that worked with you guys for a long time, so we can talk about that offline if that's probably better. But anyway, that's a little bit of my background.
Well, it's great to meet you, and it's comforting to know you have American Hospital Supply roots. I mean, to your point, we were modeled somewhat off of the American Hospital Supply chassis, and I bet we know a lot of the same people.
Oh, we do.
Oh, I love that. Well, you can count on that. I'm sure we're going to get into that in a minute. I wanted to be able to let Brian and Lane, and we've got Mark on a call that's coming in, to kind of talk a little bit about themselves. So why don't you three guys go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then Brian, I'm going to come back to you for a little bit of information about how you guys started. So we'll start with you first, if you will, Brian. Yeah.
Sure. My name is Brian DeBusk. I am an engineer by training. I have a PhD in electrical engineering. My background's actually in theoretical neurobiology and visual neuroscience.
Wow.
I grew up with a family business. I spent several years working for General Electric. I sold a business to General Electric, where actually the centricity platform that GE offers was actually called DeRoyal Business Systems before it was called Centricity. So have worked inside the company and outside the company. I also do a lot of work in higher education. I serve as the vice chairman of Lincoln Memorial University. I think that's right here in the backyard of East Tennessee as well. And then finally, I've done a lot of work in public policy. I served 6 years working for Congress as a member of the Medicare Payment Advisory Commission. So all of the issues pertaining to the delivery and financing of the Medicare program, which basically was a federal W-2 employee, part-time federal W-2 employee working for Congress.
That's an interesting piece of background there. So, yeah, Lane, you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it's always bad to go after Brian.
I know. It's bad, isn't it?
Lawyer by training, with a master's in tax law, and had several years practicing, and then I've been a real serial entrepreneur since. Background and ran some retail stores, and have been focused in healthcare for like the last 15 years. Do a lot of work with small, mid-sized companies, and spent a lot of time with working with Premier on the outside. I worked for them for several years as the VP of partnerships, where I was responsible for joint ventures and all their deals around licensing, reseller agreements, et cetera. And that's where Brian and I met. Was we put together that deal that you referenced earlier, where we involved 33 of our members to commit to long-term customer roles for us, so that we could develop the technology to produce the gown machine that led to a lot of this discussion. I don't want to steal the thunder from that either, so I'll just leave it there. But I left Premier about a year and a half ago, and have been working with DeRoyal and development for them since then.
Fantastic. Great work. Mark, would you like to share a little bit?
Yes, ma'am. Mark Justice, 31-year employee, also started in the medical business right out of school. 31 years ago, I was managing sections of plants for Pete and Brian. 31 years later, I'm the global vice president of all manufacturing and supply chain for DeRoyal. And it's been an interesting ride. And you might imagine being over manufacturing and supply chain, living through the pandemic, was very interesting. And necessity was a mother of invention. And I think we do have a very unique, one of a kind, first of a kind machine that we'll talk about more soon.
Fantastic. It seems to be the halo over the product here that we're putting together. I'm going to ask Brian to share a little bit about the background of DeRoyal. We've got a little bits and pieces that we want to kind of put together so that people can get a kind of an overview. And then I'm going to kick it off to Garrett to ask some questions. So Brian?
Yes, we're a 50-year-old. We just turned 50 this year. 50-year-old, family-owned, family-operated business. As Garrett mentioned, we were really modeled largely off of a blend of the American Hospital Supply and the Johnson & Johnson model. And, you know, Garrett, you can think of the Jack Paynes, the Dennis Crowleys, the Mark Mabrys, people like that. But
Mark,
then
Mark college with me, and he worked with the pharmaceutical division with me early on. But
well, here's how creative we were. When we started our version, we called it MediSeal instead of PharmaSeal. So that was probably not the best, but no, a little bit of background though. We started, you know, as you would know, it's again, we were a blend of J&J jeans and American Hospital Supply jeans. And originally we really started largely as a sales and marketing company. We were a cut and sew. We made some basic products in orthopedics, but over time, really from the moment we were founded, we increasingly became a manufacturer. So we immediately got into knitting and weaving. We got into patient protection products. Our big transition was in the 80s. We got into plastic injection molding. And it really taught us a lot about automation. It taught us a lot about robotics. We were and are still a market leader in a lot of the plastics, the commodity plastics that you'll see in hospitals, bowls, basins, pitchers, things like that. We do a lot of precision molding as well. So we really started, even though our roots were in orthopedics, we crossed over into surgical products, patient safety, patient protection, electrosurgical, things like that in the 80s, and really built that franchise as a manufacturer as much as we were a sales and marketing company. So for example, starting in the 80s, we had a philosophy, we'd sell it out the front door or the back door. So we were making products for all of our competitors and have been to this day. I mean, it's a significant portion of our business. But we really crossed it over again in the early 90s into wound care. And that's where we got into dressings, wound fillers, even today we even do negative pressure wound therapy machines. So you can watch our transition from orthopedic soft goods into the surgical space, into the wound care space, with increasing amounts of manufacturing and increasing emphasis on automation as we went. So if you look at where we are today, it's really the culmination of a lot of the investments and a lot of the focus that we've had. The things that we can automate, we keep inside the United States. And we've got some very powerful automation programs in plastics and in converting in particular. The other thing we've done, so for example, in cut and sew, a lot of those products really can't be automated, and you don't find a lot of sewers in the United States anymore. Well, that pushed us into nearshore manufacturing. So that's where you'll see a lot of our work that we do, for example, in cut and sew, low end assembly, very simple handheld assembly, and then electronics, soldering, grinding thermistors, things like that. We do that in Costa Rica. So Guatemala, Dominican Republic, and Costa Rica are our nearshore facilities, and we're about half and half of our employees. So what you'll see is the manual processes we've pushed nearshore, the automated processes we keep at home. So even though we have roughly the same number of employees in both settings, the domestic employees are far more productive than their foreign counterparts, simply because they have the assistance of automation.
That's fantastic. Garrett, I see she's there. Yeah, you want to, I was going to kick it off to you and let you ask some questions, but if you're ready to do so. Oh, we got to get the dogs taken care of. We can't hear you. Garrett, you're on mute.
Okay, did that fix it?
Yeah.
I'm off mute now. Gosh, I don't even know where to begin. There's so many things that go across my mind with everything you've done. I've loved watching the growth with DeRoyal. There's so many people again that we haven't. One of the questions, I guess, we're gonna. I know was it oh gosh, was it Mark that mentioned a lot of this will be focused on gowns, right?
Yes.
I can tell you a little bit about my background as it relates to gowns. I've been involved with gowns since 1980 to one degree or another, whether it's the Kimberly Clark style gown or the SMS gowns that we had. The pulp fabric gowns, we made them for the most part in Mexico. That's where we bring in the bulk material, and we had our cut and sew operations there. We always we did plant tours every month. We had our little private jet that we would take customers. You remember those? And that was phenomenal. I really enjoyed doing all of that. The J&J had their own gowns, but I've had everything from all your poly reinforced, fabric reinforced, breathable, impervious gowns, the comfort gowns, I guess, that J&J had. I took a stint for a few years. Recoveries, or you may remember them as SRI Surgical Express.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, they had the Gore-Tex gowns that were usable. We had a program similar to like your what is your green
OR? Yes, that's us.
and we did that with service. We provided all the products to the hospitals early in the morning and then picked them up, the soiled product later, reprocessed everything. But the Gore-Tex gowns, great gowns, everything from the disposables to the reusable to you name it. About to sell my dog cheap. Hold on. but in any event, the gown, I would imagine this conversation would head towards, what are the odds or the possibilities of manufacturing this type of product here in the States, outsourcing. Is that one of the things you're trying to look at right now?
We currently make somewhere between 50 and 60 gallons per minute already in a fully automated process. Now, these are AAMI level 2 gowns. So we're
Okay.
using about a 23 GSM material, but it's SMS. And
Yep.
the product we make now is it's domestically sourced SMS. And the way we make the product, we make, again, about between 50 and 60 gallons per minute. And we do it in a process where human hands don't touch it. We have between 4 and 5 people who run the entire operation. This was a huge project for us. I think we're about 2 years into it. And we really teed this up as a put a man on the moon project. Because, you can imagine when you're making a gown, you really have two pieces. You have the body tube and you have the shoulders. And the problem is, if you want to use a material sparing design where you don't waste a lot of material, you really have to run two tubes. And to make the two tubes, you've got to orient the shoulders and rejoin them to the body. And so the challenge here, we made dressings for 30 years. So we felt comfortable about the basic converting process. The challenge here was the parts, turning a pad on a dressing that's 2 inches by 2 inches, very simple, not a lot of inertia. Well, now you're turning a torso, which is feet across, and you've got a lot of mass, you've got a lot of material and automation that has to move at a very fast speed. So we teed this up really as a put a man on the moon project for us, which was, can we move this much material that quickly? And as it turns out, we can, and we can do it really well. It was we learned a lot during the project, but it was a massive investment in know-how and in cost.
Are you doing all your own cuffs? The knitted cuffs? Are you manufacturing those yourself?
What we do for now, we do knitting outside the U.S. We do a lot of knitting. For example, we make all of our own, all of the accessories that go with our orthopedic soft goods. We knit and weave all that and all of our stockinette. For this particular Amy Level 2 gown, we just use thumb slits for that. We don't put cuffs on these gowns. Now, we know how to put cuffs on these gowns because one of the breakthroughs that we had was using some of the thinking around diaper machines. So if you imagine putting a cuff on, when you think about the leggings around a child's diaper or an adult diaper, you have that elastic band, those leggings. Basically, that's what our cuff would look like when we start adding them to gowns.
I got you. Yeah, that would make sense. Are you strictly focused on that? Or are you going to be doing that for those that are looking for the cuff?
For right now, we're about 5 million gowns into making the thumb loop gowns. We're very interested in making the level 3 and level 4 gowns, which would incorporate the cuff, and be used in a sterile, because the gowns we make right now aren't sterile. The dots that we really want to connect is we want to put cuffs on the gowns, which again it's actually a pretty close putt for us, because once you get the torso turned, it's all downhill from there. But what we do is we've got to get the cuffs put on the gowns. But the other issue, and I don't think that people have considered this with domestic production for level 3 and level 4 gowns, you've got to sterilize those gowns. And really the only affordable way to sterilize those gowns is ethylene oxide. And when you look at the volume of how many ethylene oxide chambers you would need, I mean, you're talking, I think Lane and I were looking at the numbers, to make as few as 12 million gowns, I think you need 4 30-pallet ethylene oxide chambers. And so we're interested in that project because we have 4 huge chambers in Tazewell, Tennessee. We're in the process of commissioning 2 new 30-pallet chambers. They're actually being validated as we speak. We think they'll be online in about 60 days. That's been a 2-year project.
Will you do that in Knoxville?
What we could do, we would do the automation probably out of Knoxville or near Knoxville. And because the sterilizers would be about 40 minutes away in Tazewell. We do our ATO sterilization in a less populous area. I don't know if you know the area, Claiborne County, just basically north of Knoxville.
you know, that's not on the way to Cades Cove, I don't think, or is it now? It's been a while since I've been up there, but that's, you know, I lived there for a few years, you know, in college. I just loved it up there. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
It is fantastic.
It is. Yeah, great place to do that. Of course, everything that we were involved with Stir, we didn't use ETO. We had that huge Mexico right on the other side of El Paso. It was all gamma. That's just what they had the facility, so they did it. But always that funny smell, you know. You just know that.
Well, our concern with the gamma, especially, you know, in an operating room setting, I think it makes a lot of sense. Our concern was if you know you're in say in pandemic conditions in an infectious environment, our concern was the embrittlement. You know, we see gamma, when gamma hits SMS, it does change the property slightly. You know, you have a little bit of that embrittlement in the material, and we really like the way that the material stays so drapable when you ETO it. You know, it really hangs like fabric, and that was important for us.
And of course, we weren't SMS. We were all
Right.
wood fiber.
You're DuPont Sonterra. That's right. You were there during the Sonterra era because the Kimberly-Clark patent hadn't expired yet.
Yeah. A&J had their green gowns. They had that telescopic. Remember how you could put the arm through? I was surprised they. Who was it that was making all those? Did Mullica end up buying all that J&J product or that line at one time?
You know, I don't think, you know, you had Mullica. Mullica was mostly cellulose. You know, I always associate Mullica with the paper-based products, and Mullica did great in Europe. I mean, they really did well in Europe. But we didn't see, you know, you think of the Mullica, the White Knights, sort of the off brands of some of those. And whereas Mullica's done great in wound care here, and they've done really well with
Wound care. They're bigger in wound care than I think than Medline and Cardinal combined.
Well, they're big breakthrough with silicones. But what really put them back on the map were all those silicone dressings, the non-adherent dressings. And, you know, I'm just going to give them credit. They did some really great innovation.
Well, one of the smartest things they did, and I was with, I think we were called Baxter at the time. It might have been American, but a company called Regent. You know, we're big in the glove business, exam glove business, surgeon's glove business. And Regent came to us and asked us if we wanted, they had that glove biogel, but they weren't doing much with it. And they said, look, we need your all sales force. We want to get it out there. And our product manager thought we were much better and said, oh no, we'll just compete with you in the market. Biogel it's really the market leader in surgeon's glove business. You know, Mullica bought them. They own that. They've owned that. They've done some smart things. They really, but they're so big here. And wound care is a great area to be in. And I know you guys are in it.
I think that's another area that we probably should look at for domestic production, because I think that's another area where the U.S. has really fallen behind. And there's no reason that we have to, because those products, you could automate a lot of those processes.
Absolutely, you could. And that's the only advantage really China had over us for forever is they're so cheap. But all this automation is, it's taken that part of it out. You don't have the logistical issues. The pandemic's taught a lot, you know.
Well, I totally agree. I think the pandemic, you know, what the pandemic taught us, and I think where we really were asleep at the switch at the national level, was when we would say a distributor would go out like a Cardinal, you know, would go outsource a nearshore product, they would outsource it to Southeast Asia. You know, the problem there was there was some implicit risk in the purchase of that product. You know, we went for probably 20 years where we were outsourcing all this to Asia. And let's say we got a 5 cent or 50 cent better price on a product. The problem was we were signing our customers up for risk in the process. And what happened is when that pandemic hit, all that risk unwound. So what you saw, I mean, I would say it was akin to the savings and loan crisis. I mean, it was basically a systemic unwinding of risk. And fortunately for us, COVID wasn't that bad. And China resumed shipping product, because if China had not resumed shipping product, we would have been in a world of hurt.
Oh, I know. We're just, in my opinion, I still think we were entirely too dependent on China. I would love to see more domestic production personally. I've made a lot. I've been to a lot of the factories where they make the product for DeRoyal over the years. You know, there again, for another conversation, there's so many people that we know in common. It's kind of funny, but
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and we still maintain one tradition. Mark will tell you, you can eat off the floors in their plants. That's something that we're very, very passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely true. Can I add one piece, Bryce? So I think I also want to speak to the automation. Gary, your question earlier about the cuffs, and we ended up going with thumb holes. The good news about automation is the speed and the lack of human contact with the timing and the equipment, et cetera. The downside is you get limited in your design capabilities. So our one machine does, you know, we can do universal and extra large on that machine, and it's a meaningful change out to swap the sizes over. But what you can't do is just switch and change the design that you're building on that equipment. So that's where we think we're probably 80% ahead of. Am I doing the feedback here? Am I talking? Anyway.
We can hear you.
Okay, and we feel like we're 80% ahead of everybody because we've been through this automation process, but there's certainly some tweaking to do to create a surgical gown and to expand our footprint and our line. And that's really a lot of where we're looking to make the additional investment. And I feel like that bleeds over. DeRoyal's done a very nice job in the face shield space with automation there. And so there's some real good opportunities to sort of expand that footprint and again, create the security that you were talking about that, you know, that we were lacking. And as we headed into the pandemic, and make sure we don't get caught with our collective pants down again, the way we did, you know, back when as the pandemic started.
And to Lane's point, first of all, great point, Lane. And the other areas that we've done a lot of work in, face shield automation. We do have a machine that makes 12 million face masks a year. Human hands don't touch the face shield. And the other is we make about 14 million sets of protective eyewear every year as well. And that's been a great project for us because what we've done is we redesigned the frame. We've redesigned our protective eyewear now. We call them Spies X. And what we're doing now is hand assembling the frame to the lens in Dominican Republic. But the way we designed the frame, it supports automation. Our previous design didn't support the automation. And what we envision is making about 40% or more of our protective eyewear in the US. And then what we'll do is have spillover into Dominican Republic where we can scale up quickly in the event of a shortage. So we're actually blending domestically and
you know, do you recall I want to say they were US Safety, Lexa, Kansas. Does that ring a bell to you?
US Safety?
Yeah, they made protective eyewear here in the U.S. MCR Safety ended up buying them out of Tennessee. They're in Germantown or Collierville. They used to be a brand. They're big in the safety industry, and Granger buys a lot of stuff from those folks, but they don't do any manufacturing or very little in the U.S. But they did buy U.S. Safety. A guy named St. Pill was the president CEO. I think he passed. I just didn't know if you knew the company. I get a lot of requests for government business for U.S. manufactured eyewear.
Yes.
Great if you had that, or it sounds like you're close.
What you've seen is, you know, for the last 20 years, that we've outsourced that eyewear. As we've outsourced that eyewear, they pushed everyone to that thread-through design, where you basically have to make your own glasses by weaving the frame through the lens. And we do not do any of that. I mean, our design, the goal is to get that lens as flush as possible, and then we fold down across the frame onto the lens so you get a nice uniform front. And to the best of my knowledge, we're still the only eyewear out there that's anti-fog, anti-glare, and anti-static on both sides. So I mean, wow. It's a nice product that the professionals love this.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I spent a few years with a company where they merged with the biggest eyewear company in the world. I guess they're close to $200 billion. A French company and an Italian company ran their for them. But I didn't know we were going to talk about. That's fascinating to me. There's a lot we could ultimately talk about it.
Yes. I wanted to get to, I've got a question, and this is gonna sound like a stupid question, but what constitutes sanitation in your mind, Brian, or whoever needs to answer that? When you talk about the gowns, and it surprised me that they'd have to go through so much effort to getting them sanitized, especially the gowns with this wonderful, machine that you have now that automates spitting them out, I thought in packages already, but what do you have to do to get them sanitized, and why, if they're coming out of a machine and nobody's touching them?
Well, the level 1 and level 2 gowns are largely non-sterile. So what happens is, as they come off the machine, they're automatically boxed. We have a crate erector that builds the box out. We don't have people putting gowns in boxes. It's a finished product. The level 3s and level 4s are where you really get into the sterile technique. Those are that are sterilely presented. So Mark, correct me, but I think, are we 10 or 12 gowns per bag? I think we're 10 gowns per inner bag.
That's correct, Brian. There are 12 bags of 10 each in a bag.
In a case. So imagine when you go to a sterile configuration, you're actually down to 1 gown per package, and then you sterilize those gowns individually. And that's where you really get into the surgeon's gown and to the higher, the level 3, level 4 protection.
Okay, I got you.
When you're talking about gowns, not to interrupt you, but is this patient related, or patient gowns or isolated gowns? Are they all strictly surgeon's gowns? Well, the thumb loop, I remember selling gowns, the poly gowns, which were so hot, but the funeral homes would buy a lot of those, when they were working, that.
Everything we do right now, the 5 million gowns that we make and the million plus gowns a month we're making now are all AAMI level 2. And we're working with Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but 23 GSM material?
No, you're correct, Brian.
Okay, 23 GSM. What we would have to do to move up to the level 3, level 4 is we would move to a heavier material.
Yeah, 23
is this,
and they like that. I mean,
Yeah, the machine we have can run heavier material as is. I mean, we can span a pretty wide range of materials in the existing machine that we have.
Right. Now, are you going as far as thinking of anything even further, like jumpsuits, those kinds of products as well?
We have not looked at jumpsuits yet, to the best of my knowledge. Mark, have you guys explored? I mean, I think we stopped at level 3s and level 4s for now, haven't we?
That's correct, Brian. One of the things we looked at is a chemo gown, which is used for specific applications within the hospital, which again is just different materials fed through a same kind of concept machine, but not jumpsuits.
Yeah, I think the important thing about the chassis that we're using here, the automation chassis we use for these gowns is basically a continuous roll process. And I think that gives us a huge advantage. There's sort of 2 schools of thought. You've got the pick and placers, and then you've got the continuous feed people. And the challenge with pick and place is you just can't get the throughput like you can. I mean, you could think of our machine. Our machine is just basically a huge newspaper machine that does a really wicked 90-degree turn that if you looked at it in practice, you would never think it could make a turn, but it always makes the turn.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I would love to see that one of these days. I really would. I've been through so many factories over the years with a real emphasis on the glove manufacturing, because it seemed like Baxter was sending me somewhere to tour factories.
Yeah. We'd love to show. We'd love to take you on a tour. We'd love to show the equipment off. It is, again, I've grown up in manufacturing my whole life. It is really sobering to see this machine. I mean, it swallows a roll within a couple hours.
That's fantastic. You don't have video of that, do you?
Right.
You don't have a video of that?
We have a lot of pictures and we have a few videos of pieces, don't we, Mark?
I would love to have some pictures to go along with the interview.
We do have public video that was done by some of our partners that I'm sure if you go online or we can send you a link, I think you can find that video out there.
Perfect. I'd love to have a couple of pictures to go with this. I'm going to end up saying, you know, I know you're all about innovation and what you've done so far has just been amazing. I think what I read, it was the first machine of its kind. Are you aware it's the only one?
Yes, it's to the best of our knowledge, it is the only machine of its kind.
Yeah,
Okay.
we feel like someone else would have been screaming pretty loudly if they were in the space this way.
Okay.
We've not heard from anyone. Not anywhere in the world, actually. So not just here. So, but our intent was, and I know we talked about this earlier, was we really built this idea around being post-pandemic. And so that's why we had the commitments from the hospitals to go with us long term, because we knew if we were going to be prepared for another pandemic, we had to be able to bridge from here to there, which we hope there's nothing on the other side.
You almost had to build that ecosystem to be able to.
So we wanted the committed customers who understood that we could do this domestically, and we needed their support, and we needed their patience and long-term participation as committed customers, so we could make that investment. And so that's really the approach we've taken. It's been very, effective that way.
Yeah, and that's where credit goes to Lane. You know, when Lane was working with Premier on pulling these hospital systems together, it was really those 33 hospitals that said, we're ready to enter into a 6-year commitment that gave us the confidence that we needed to take the leap. Because, now that the machine is up and running, hindsight's 2020 and we can all feel good about our decision. We would not have taken that leap of faith had Lane not brought those 33 hospitals. It would have just been too much risk.
Yeah, well, thanks for all the credit, Brian, but the pandemic really helped me scare the crap out of me.
So those gowns shooting up 15x in price helped you just a little bit, Lane?
Yeah, I would take all the credit, but yeah, it's
I'm sure you guys have seen or at least heard about the desire. The government keeps throwing out this request for millions and millions of gowns made domestically, which there's not that capacity. Have you all seen much of that, or do you need any of that? I've got a lot of information on it I can share with you.
We've had several. Lane, why don't you speak to that? We've had several near misses where people have wanted to work with us or to expand. What we noticed was originally a lot of the gown manufacturers that were making them for the government during the pandemic, I mean, they were basically just warehouses with heat sealing machines and poly bags. They were basically just sealing up plastic. And, you have to wonder how many of those gowns were made, because I can't imagine them being used, unless conditions are just really dire. And so, Lane, can you speak to that? I mean, we've had a couple of near misses.
I think, Garrett, probably the easiest way to sum it up, and if you've been close enough to this, you've seen it, is there's been a hurry up and wait approach to releasing those opportunities, and then an unrealistic back end of who could actually perform at that pace. And so when they suddenly say, hey, we need 100 million gowns in 12 months, no one can say yes to it. Everyone can say yes to it, but nobody can actually perform. And so we saw a lot of failures in that process. And we just sort of said, look, if you want us to do this is long term, like we'll buy all the equipment necessary to meet your demands. But we need to know your demands are long term and committed so that we can make the investment and take the time and effort to do that. And that's where we couldn't get the consistency of what's the message, because they said, no, we need all these gowns in a year. Okay, well, the only thing we know for sure is you're not going to get domestic gowns at the price you're asking for in that period of time, because nobody has the physical capability to do that. And so we kept going in and out of these conversations, and we just tried to stay realistic and say, if you want us to do this, we'll start producing for you, 9 months out, and here's the rate at which we'll be able to run, and this is how fast we can get them to you, and this is the price we can hit. Our price is uniquely beneficial because no one else is doing it with automation. So if you're doing it domestically with employees, you're spending more money than it's going to cost us to make them. And so we could establish that very easily, but it was hard to get enough heads around the table that said, yeah, let's be realistic about this and say, it's a 9-month process to get a machine built. Here's the rate at which it can produce. here are the sizes it can make. What kind of commitment do you want to make to that equation? And we've not been able to pull all those things to the same place at the same table to get everybody to nod their head the same way at the same time. And so that's really been sort of our frustration with it. But we're in. I mean, we did this because we wanted to be able to protect our healthcare workers. I mean, that was our motivation from the beginning of this. Was this is not okay. To lose people in the healthcare space over a 50 cent or a $1.50 item because we can't protect them is on us. I mean, that's a really bad way to lose people who are doing the job that we need them to do. And we took this on from that perspective and said, yeah, it'd be great to make some money at the end of the day on this, but we can't let this happen again. And so that was really the motivation for DeRoyal, for the 33 members who participated, and for Premier that showed the leadership on pulling all this together, because we just said, we can't let this happen again.
I love the mentality, the thought process where you guys are coming from. I could wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think that's it as a rule, or hopefully as a whole, our country thinking more along the lines like what you're talking about. I can share with you some of the things that have happened as it relates to gloves. Gloves for the most part come out of China, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, those places. Every one of those countries I mentioned are non-TAA compliant countries. The government does everything they can to not buy from China. However, they've bought from Malaysia for years and years, but there's a push right now to eliminate. The way these companies get around it is they go these waivers. I'm sure you all are aware of all that kind of stuff, maybe. Okay, well, right now, because there are a handful of factories now in the US that are producing exam gloves anyway, nitrile exam gloves, the government's trying to go there first and buy everything they can. So if they're going to do that model, I would think they would follow suit with gowns. And of course, they talk about doing that with masks. The frustration with the mask factories that have been in the US, it's been such a feast and famine business. Some of them have gone out of business, gone bankrupt a few times, and that's tough. The government says they're going to support it, and then they don't. But this glove thing, where one factory that it's completely automated, 24/7, 365. They've only been producing about a month and a half now. I've been working pretty closely with them. They make a fabulous glove. They're already on all the government contracts. I just think that's probably going to happen with the gowns. I don't know why it wouldn't, unless you were exorbitantly too high.
No, I think that is what will happen at some point. I know their positioning now is to make us pandemic ready rather than them making commitments to buy. And I think actually it's a very smart model. One of the things we did a similar deal with masks that we did with gowns with we being Premier. Did a deal with on masks the same way. And the question we kept getting asked is, the government going to come confiscate your stuff? And we said, no, because we're already doing with it what they want done, which is selling it to US hospitals. What we were not doing was exporting product that would compel them to come confiscate it and make sure it got distributed domestically. Our customer base was already the people who needed the product. And so when we set this business up, we did the same thing and made sure our commitments to the domestic customer. And that's who we want to know. And we told them, look, at some point, we may end up a little more expensive than somebody else, but this is the insurance policy. These goods are going to be there no matter what. So decide how much insurance you want to buy. Do you want it to be 25% of your assortment, 30%, 50%? That's up to you. But we can tell you this for sure, come hell or high water, if there's another pandemic, we're going to produce. We're using all domestic supply, and we're going to be able to do that. And so it put us in a unique position from that standpoint, is that we're reliant on no one. And so being in that position, knowing we can get this done if things get bad again, just puts the DeRoyal in a very unique spot that way.
It does. It is, whatever it is, maybe, who knows what it's going to be, but it'll be something. And you're just doing the right thing for the country. Here is an ideal GPO to be working with. They think outside the box compared to some of the other GPOs. They did that deal. I want to say it was with gloves and maybe a few other items. What's it called? S2S. Are you familiar with?
Yes, I actually ran that division for a little while for them when there was a transition in leadership. I was still there, so I took that role on for several months, right in the middle of the pandemic. So our phone line. Yeah.
What
Yeah, Lane, just to correct, Lane ran S2S for some time.
And
Like literally, I don't mean figuratively ran S2S. Lane was appointed the managing director of S2S and ran it as their leader for how long, Lane?
Long enough to take it from losing money to making money. How's that? That's
did you work? Does the name Alan Bagliori ring a bell?
I think I know that name from earlier than when I was there, because I was only at Premier a couple of years before the pandemic, and then through the first 2 years of it. So,
but he's an interesting guy. He's an older gentleman he was one of the, I guess, original guys with Medline way back in the day, and then he started Cypress, a big glove company, did really well with that, and then he did that S2S thing with Premier. He's the one that created it, sold it to them. I think retained 48% of the company for a while, and then sold all of it to Premier. I think he's out of together now.
I think so too. I think actually, or he may have something to do with they've got an outsourced distribution. He might be involved in that. I think. Yeah.
But you guys can.
And also, Garrett, just for the sake of completeness, I also want to mention, if you look at some of the S2S products, like all the soft goods and a lot of the orthopedic products, those are actually made by DeRoyal. We just put Premier's name on them.
I love that. You guys, brilliant.
Yeah, guys, we've got to finish up. I know, Garrett, you and I have another call coming up here shortly, but I want to say this, or at least ask this as a last question is, like I said, I know innovation's in your heart and soul, and you kind of bleed it right now because you're all over it. But where do you think you're headed through the rest of this year, 2023? What direction and what kind of partners might you be looking for, or types of people that you want to meet?
For us, this is a big year for us because we're bringing the sterilization chambers online, the 2 new sterilizers. We're bringing the gown machine, it's been only running a handful of months. A lot of the automation and the investments that we built, that we made to rebalance our supply chain are really just starting to get their legs. So for us, I would say digesting the investments that we've made and really making sure that they produce fruit, which they are. And then the other real emphasis for us right now is trying to open up these channels. And, Garrett, this is probably a secondary topic for you and I to discuss. But, if you look at how the major distributors in healthcare are segmenting the market right now, it's pretty dysfunctional, because what you're doing, you're seeing all this extreme bundling where the customer can't afford to break the bundle. And I'll give you a great example. I was actually having dinner with the CFO from a Syracuse, New York hospital last Wednesday night. And he was explaining to me during the pandemic, even though Premier had these great prices on N95 masks through Prestige, one of Lane's deals, he couldn't afford to buy the Prestige masks because he had to get them through the distributor, because if he broke the bundle and didn't buy it through the distributor, he actually would have to pay fees, extra distribution fees. It's called a rebate trap. And so, again, Marriott, this is a long-winded question to your answer, but I would say for us, making sure that the bets we've made, making sure those ships come home is job one. But job two, close behind, is looking at alternative distribution vehicles and looking at ways to make sure companies like DeRoyal have access to the market and can get to that ultimate customer. Because what you see in these channels now are more and more hidden fees. Garrett, you probably lived in a Cardinal world where they were charging 2, 3, 4, 5 points. There are programs now where distributors can charge 15 to 30 points. Yes.
I wholeheartedly agree. You know your stuff, and that's absolutely right on.
Yeah. And I think the problem here is, it's one thing for us as a private company to say, oh, we don't like it, we don't think it's fair. But I think the bigger issue is you're compounding all this systemic risk into the U.S. supply chain, because what you're doing is you're really forcing these customers into 3 chutes. And if any one of those go badly, then basically everything goes badly. And it really turns the supply chain into this all or none proposition. And I think people, you know, if you pulled an American off the street and they really were exposed to how much systemic risk is in the medical device supply chain, I think they'd be shocked.
Yeah, one more thing is when I was at Premier, we were determining who was the right partner for this venture that we did on the gowns. We ended up with DeRoyal because the innovation component of their business is not new. They've been doing this, and they've retained domestic manufacturing when everyone else was leaving and going to Asia for their products. And so for us, that was very important. Obviously, we were looking for a domestic partner, but we also wanted someone who wasn't innovating for the first time, that knew how to create automation, knew how to develop, because we were going to break something, you know, from the way it had been doing and create something different. And so they were the easy partner that rose to the top of that conversation for us because of that prior commitment to innovation, the way they've retained domestic supply and domestic manufacturing. And it does put them in a unique spot in the US, that they are the size they are, still privately held, and still doing automation and having manufacturing roles at that level in the US. They've gone near shore in the places that are very labor intensive, but they never went to Asia for their sourcing. And that was a critical piece for the partner we were looking for.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to say thank you to all of you, and Garrett, especially you, for spending some time here with us and knowing that you had some background here and not realizing you had so much background with DeRoyal. So thank you so much for co-hosting with me.
I know we're short on time now, but I would love to have another call if that works at some point.
Yeah, I'm happy to arrange that for you guys. That's kind of what we're all about here. So what I ask you guys to do is just kind of stay on for just 1 second after I say goodbye to everybody else. But Brian, Lane, Mark, you know, I hate that I can't see your face, Mark, but Mark on the
if you could see it, you would hate it less.
Thank you guys so much. This has been probably one of the most informative interviews I think I've done in a long time, and so educational for those of us who didn't really understand some of the background of what was going on during the pandemic and post-pandemic, of what could happen, you know, in terms of really looking at innovation and how fast we can actually get some product out there that means lives and means health and wellness to other people. So thank you so much for what you guys are doing. So stay with me for a second. I'm just going to say goodbye to everyone watching. So if you're watching this on YouTube, go to www.frontrunnersinnovate.com. You'll get this interview. You'll get some bio material on these wonderful faces that you're seeing here and some links to kind of check out for yourself. So I'm going to say thank you and goodbye to all of those folks now. So